Hello, and welcome to the Scott Mize Show, a podcast focused on health, diet, bodybuilding, and philosophy. I interview experts, doctors, coaches, and N=1 case studies to answer your questions about improving health, achieving your best physique, and making sustainable progress. We'll cover topics from carnivore and ketogenic diets, to bodybuilding, to life philosophy, and everything in between. Enjoy the show. This episode is brought to you by Optimal Carnivore. A lot of people ask me about organ meats. Do you need to eat organ meat? How do I eat organ meat? And Optimal Carnivore was created by carnivores for carnivores. They created a unique organ complex from grass-fed animals in New Zealand. It includes 9 different organs: liver, brain, heart, thymus, kidney, spleen, pancreas. And taking just 6 capsules is the same as eating an ounce of raw organ meat from the butcher. I've been personally using Optimal Carnivore for years. My wife and I use it almost every single day. It's great when I don't have fresh organs available, don't feel like eating them, don't feel like cooking them, or if I'm traveling, I know I can get a variety of super high quality organs daily. And they have lots of different products, from their beef liver product to their organ complex to their brain product and their bone and marrow product. They have excellent products filled with highest quality ingredients, and you can get 10% off your order and support the show by going to the link in the description of this episode and using the code carnivore10 at checkout. That's carnivore10 to save and support the show. Thank you. Jordan Power is an internet entrepreneur and the president of Gray Smoke Media, a marketing firm that drives billions in revenue for top law firms, politicians, and e-commerce giants using unorthodox, bespoke tactics. Last year, his chronic disease of 18 years, ulcerative colitis, had progressed to the point of him requiring surgery to remove a foot of his colon. By completely overhauling his diet, introducing specific supplements, and removing all chemicals from his house, he was able to put his disease in total remission. He's recently authored an ebook titled The Freedom Blueprint: 35 Remarkable Strategies to Conquer Chronic Illness, which he outlines his course of action and how he did it. Welcome to the show, Jordan Power.
Hey, Scott, how are you?
Good. So you were just talking before we started about your background and your family. So I'd love to start there. Like how were you raised? How are you introduced to food and medicine? And we can go from there into some of your journey over the last 18 years.
Well, I'll start by saying I ate well as a kid. My mom would kill me if I didn't say that. I grew up in a household of urologist, which is a penis doctor, if people are wondering. And that was actually my first summer job. I worked in my dad's office at 15, and my job was to fold the letters telling guys how to shave their scrotums. And I never knew what they would do in the rooms. I never understood what was going on. I just know that the guys would every Friday was vasectomy day, and the guys would slowly walk out of the room. And I grew up in that world of it was a crazy time period where I don't know how it is in the United States, but in Canada, it used to be heavily regulated that the pharmaceutical reps could not schmooze, let's say, doctors. And they kind of changed that sometime when I was about maybe 14. But before that, it was a glory period where we would, go to the Bahamas, and we'd go on all these trips, and we would sit courtside at NBA games. And there was never any pressure, of course, to prescribe the drug from the pharma rep. And I grew up around pharma reps. I grew up going to conferences with pharma reps. I grew up just in that whole world where my dad would give me, squishy balls with different products on that. And I think there's a programming that goes on there that's really intense that you don't realize is happening, especially when you're, and you're a very impressionable young kid. You just think, oh, this is, these are the good people. These are the people coming to take care of us and save us. And then at the same time, I have a father that's a urologist. I have a mother that's a general practitioner. And, they're working like dogs, and I'm hearing stories after stories. And at around the time I was about 18 years old, I went on 3 doses of Accutane. I had really bad cystic acne. I tried everything. The first dose, I was fine. Second dose, I was fine. And these sort of cycles. And then the third cycle, I became extremely sick. I was going to the washroom and probably an hour at a time. And I would look down the toilet. I mean, this is pretty graphic for people, but just what it is. It would be like a liter of blood in the toilet.
Oh,
And I dropped probably 25 pounds in about 2 months, I would say, eating normally.
wow.
Just because everything was going through me. I looked really, really sick. And of course, when I tell, because I'm a gay guy, when I tell this to gay guys who are brainwashed, they think that's great. They always say like, "Oh, that sounds like a really great diet." You know,
Oh, God.
the Ozempic crowd is what we'll call them.
Yeah.
Let's say.
You probably didn't have 25 pounds to lose.
No, I'm pretty lean. You can see right now.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
I usually am. And so I was extremely sick. I was admitted to hospital over and over and over. And I knew it was bad because when my initial stool sample came back, my mom called me just crying on the phone and was explaining to me that it was ulcerative colitis. You know, obviously the first thing you do is you Google and you see, hey, so what is ulcerative colitis? And you're looking up, this is my life. And suddenly you're swallowing 12 pills a day and squirting steroid enemas up your ass, and your life dramatically changes in a period of time. And then that kind of continued battling the disease for really, I'm 36 now. That was 18 years ago that I initially got my diagnosis.
Wow. And can you talk about like what you went through since then? How ulcerative colitis evolved in your life, and what are some of the things you tried, and how you came about finding solutions eventually.
Sure. So I'm at this point, when I'm 18, I'm surrounded by two doctors, and then it's just referral, scan, prescription, meet this person, listen to this talk, and nowhere. And I'm really not trying to fault my parents here, but it's like nowhere in that discussion was there anything about like what's going in your body. And I'm not just talking about food because we were eating quite well. I'm talking about beauty products. I'm talking about things like sleep affecting your microbiome. I'm talking about all these different elements, the total package of health. And so what I went to all these doctors, and the conversation when I would have a flare was almost always the number one prescription was obviously the actual prescription, but the second prescription was to eat white bread. So Wonder Bread, that poison. So the logic behind that is that the starches will, kind of create a bulk in the stool, and it will be harder you'll kind of stop the flow of diarrhea. And they told me that. Then it was just, if the pills aren't working, try more. Try this other medication. I probably cycled through 4 or 5 medication, multiple hospital visits over a period of time. And then around the time of my 20s, like say mid 20s, I was still eating really well and exercising. The disease kind of went into a stage of remission where it would kind of flare up here and there, but it wasn't at all at the level of when I initially started. And the doctors would just say, "Oh, that's the medication working, and you're good. Just stay on your medication." But it was a lot of money, and it was a lot of pills, and it didn't make me feel good. And I definitely felt my hair thinning and other side effects. The steroids would make my face look like a pumpkin. And I just thought, I don't really want to live like that. And so I cycled on and off the pills. I would sometimes go months where I wouldn't take any pills and I'd be fine. And then about 2 years ago, I went to South America with 2 friends of mine. And the way this disease works is that it's sort of like a fast moving train, and that like it's really hard to slow it down. Like, when you hit the brakes on a train, it takes a while for it to stop. And something happened in South America that I now believe was a combination of alcohol, low sleep and partying, seed oils, heavy pesticides, herbicides, meat that's being fed seed oils, just a combination of things that it just started this insane train in my body that really took me back to when I was 18 years old. Same kind of feeling where I was going to the washroom on my vacation probably 14 to 18 times a day on average, couldn't do any sightseeing. And the other thing about this disease that's really, really terrible is that it starts once it gets going, it's because it's an autoimmune disease, it kicks off a bunch of arthritis symptoms. So you are bloated, you're shitting all day, you're lethargic. You also have arthritis where it's very hard for you to walk, constant kind of chronic pain. And then because we know so much about sort of the gut brain connection, your mood plummets. So all this is happening. I mean, you'd be depressed if all that was happening to you anyways. But all this is sort of happening to you. And then also you feel this dramatic drop in your mood where it's really tough to regulate your mood and it's really tough to get up in the morning, and sort of anxiety and depression, and you're battling all that. So it's just this like crazy amount of things that are thrown at you while you're on vacation, trying to enjoy yourself. So I got back to Toronto and went back on the pharma train as quickly as I could, right? Desperate. So multiple steroid enemas, multiple medications. There was biologics. There was all these different things. And then for a period of about 6 to 8 months, I couldn't get ahead of it. I couldn't stop the train. I was extremely sick. And my doctor sat me down and said to me, we don't know what to do. And we're thinking the best way to get this under control is to do a surgery next month where we cut out about 14 inches of your colon. And then I wouldn't have a bag, but it was sort of like, I mean, it sounds really sick, but it was like they were going to just take the tube and reconnect it to my rectum. And I guess you would have trouble shitting the rest of your life or something.
Yeah, sounds rough.
Yeah. And I just looked at him and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And he was like, well, you don't really have any other options at this point. We sort of exhausted everything. And I left. And the way I live my life is very heterodox. I'm an internet entrepreneur. I worked in the media, so I know it's all fake. And I just don't really believe a lot of the systems we kind of operate in, because I've opened so many boxes and seen how the corruption and sort of that there's not a lot of money and integrity. So I went home and I sort of was like, this can't be right. Like, why would my body be attacking itself? Like it's not like that serves any sort of biological function. And the first video I saw on YouTube was a guy named Paul Saladino, which is, I don't know if many people know him, but he's the Carnivore MD, kind of lives this cool life in Costa Rica.
Yeah.
He just surfs. And he was really, at that time, was eating a very restrictive diet of basically it was sort of, organic meats, raw dairy, your cheeses, your milks, your fruits. He had raw honey, and that was kind of it. And I thought, well, let me just stick with that, like about 10 foods. Let me just try to stay there, almost like a quasi elimination diet. Let me just kind of live in that realm, and started that. And then just stayed on YouTube. It was like, you get in that cycle of the algorithm, and I just kept watching more and more and more videos of different people. And the biggest thing that really kicked off all this was studying places in the world where they don't have the diseases that we battle on a daily basis, mostly the autoimmune diseases. So there's a place in Papua New Guinea called Catawba, and they don't have electricity. Yeah, modern communication, or really antibiotics. And even their teenagers don't have acne, which is another sign that something's off. And there are instances of heart disease, stroke, chronic ailments, extremely rare numbers. And I started looking into that, and I started to look into the blue zones around the world. And I sort of had a moment. I remember just sitting in my living room where I was like, and I don't mean intentionally, but I sort of just was like, are we being poisoned? Like, are we being poisoned on a level that is hidden? Some of the conspiracy types will go into the realm of that it being intentional, but that wasn't where I was coming from. It was that like, oh no, we need to feed this many people, and we need to keep this machine running, and you need seed oils because they're cheap, and you need these things, antibiotics because they're an easy way to get someone through the medical system. And that was the period when I just started uncovering everything, which I can kind of get into here. I've been talking through your whole podcast, but I can kind of explain to you kind of where I went from that. But it was largely that I realized I needed to get all the poison, mentally too, out of my life. And so I went on this journey of the past year. I overhauled my mental health. I overhauled my physical health. I overhauled all the products in my house that I eat and all the products in my house that I put on my body, or, laundry, dishwasher, everything. And within, I would say about 90 days, the disease had gone away so much that my doctor, when I went for a colonoscopy, brought me into a room and was like, he looked like he saw a ghost. And I was in my head, I was thinking, oh fuck, was that like colon cancer or something? And he looked at me and he was like, it's gone. And and he's like, I don't know what happened. And I said to him, I said, oh, well, I started to kind of explain to him all the things I did and stuff. And his reaction, which was very telling, it was, no, it's probably the new medication that's working. It's like,
Only
okay.
explanation.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of walked out of there, and I remember it was a really sunny day, and I sort of looked at the sky, and in my head I was thinking, oh my God, I've been given another life. Like, I've been given a brand new life, and I better not waste it. I better kind of just from here on out, I better kind of grasp every opportunity moving forward, because most people with diseases, it doesn't go away. It's just battling it until the day they die, sort of thing.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about some of those changes you made. But before doing that, I want to talk more about your mindset as you were going through this. Like how you must have had a tremendous amount of resilience, first of all, to keep fighting and keep working through this and become so successful in other areas of your life while battling this disease. Can you talk about how it affected you mentally, personally, socially, and all of those things?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I've never been a spiritual person. I would consider myself agnostic religiously, but there's a spiritual person I follow on YouTube who's quite controversial. Her name's Teal Swan. And out of all the different people that I've connected with over my life, I had a great therapist who also kind of turned my life around. But she's one of the people that really fixed my mind. And one of the things she speaks about is that behind every person that has achieved a level of greatness, whether that's in politics, sports, whatever, is trauma. And trauma is kind of this fire that keeps you going at 2, 3 in the morning. And I wouldn't be the person I am today, career wise, or probably been able to battle something like this and take it on in other aspects of my life if I didn't have deep trauma as being the gay guy that was bullied all through my teens. I had chronic acne. I was, kind of an outcast with a lisp. I would get beat up at school. My parents would have to keep coming to the school because, they'd be calling me all these, names for being gay. And that formed me into the person I am today. And I really do believe that we look at so many things in our life as, horror, whether that's, your dog dying, a family member dying, this friend betrays you, this business person betrays you. And she really makes you realize that, like, yes, those things are bad, but there are also opportunities to grow. And the reason I am the way I am, and the reason I became an entrepreneur and was able to take on all these things, podcasting, book writing, stuff like that, is because I still think there's something inside me that is wanting to prove all those people on the playground wrong. And it's a little bit sad to kind of think like that at 36, to think that, like, I'm still that gay guy trying to prove all the people that bullied me that I am lovable and important, and that I'm something that they didn't say it, like, something other than what they said I was. And that constitution that I've built over the years is invaluable. And I do really feel like I can take on anything, whether that's starting a business, writing a book. Now I'm doing music actually at the moment, because I have built up this really intense relationship with myself where no matter what, I know I'll be okay. And I know I can rely on myself, and that people will betray me and break my heart. But there's a person here that is going to be okay as long as I have myself. And that self concept is, especially with younger generations now who rely so heavily on external validation, that self concept in them is really lacking. And So it's kind of wacky to say, like, I'm so thankful for being bullied and, my dad abandoning our family and all the different things in my life. But I don't know where I would be if I didn't have all those things.
Yeah, it's kind of the definition of building character, in a way. And that's an incredible growth mindset to have, to be able to see things in that light. So I'd love to talk about some of the changes you made. You talked about removing a lot of things. What were some of those things? What did you replace them with? And how did that affect you?
Sure. So one of Paul's things that he talks about that is very, let's say, controversial when you bring it up at dinner parties, but um, I I wasn't really hyper attuned to how my body was responding to certain foods. I think a lot of people are like that unless they do an elimination diet or some of these tests that you can do now. And over the years, there were things I would eat and then immediately feel like crap, like spinach and kale is a perfect example. But that kale has great PR, like that's all you hear now is kale, kale, kale chips. You just got to get some green smoothies in your body. And Paul really talks about the fact that if you eat too much of these plants, lectins, oxalates, different defense chemicals in the actual plants, that it's not great for your body. Plus, of course, how they're prepared, right? The pesticides and the herbicides and the glyphosates and the different things that go into these products. So when I started eating Paul's diet, which was largely just minimal fruit, the meat, and the dairy, which never bothered me, so dairy was fine. I was already starting from that sort of baseline of like, okay, none of these things bother me, so it's time to start introducing things back into my life, and let's see one by one. Let's get hyper attuned to how you feel, not just physically but mentally. For example, something that I kind of always had a glass or two of was wine, and so much of wine has the sulfites in them. And so I would go to my mom's house and I'd have, a few glasses of wine over dinner, and then I would try to sleep and I would get the worst insomnia till like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. And I could never figure out why. It felt like almost there was a steroid in my body that was keeping me up. And so I started to do that with every food that I was enjoying. And, we know the bad ones. We know let's just say most of the stuff in the grocery store, let's say 90% of the grocery store, the middle aisles, we know that stuff's already processed. And to avoid that, because it's got 40, 50 ingredients and some of the stuff that's been banned in Europe. But we don't think of like things like broccoli. We don't think of things like kale. We don't think of certain fruits. We don't think of nuts is another one. And so I just kind of went through and would add something in, and then I'd kind of keep a little bit of a journal and say to myself, don't buy this. So I would write down, had kale. And one time I had this like kale spinach thing and I got really, really sick an hour later. And so I started that on my list. So my grocery list is unorthodox in a way, in that it's more what doesn't affect me, where some people kind of go the other way. Like, I like these foods. And it's like, well, no, these are the foods that don't bother me. And it becomes boring, definitely, over time. But when you've been living in hell for so long, you don't really miss those little foods as much, because it's really that trade-off of like, well, I sleep better, my skin looks great, my sex life's better, my friendships are better, I'm a happier person who can actually vacation now. So I don't really need those things as much. And that's almost like also another lesson in itself, in that like, why am I reaching for XYZ alcohol? Let's examine why I need 12 drinks or the kind of alcohol I was consuming before. So it forces you to kind of kick off that whole thing. But the other part of this whole thing that's so interesting to me is that when I was able to get my colitis under control largely with food, I then had a conversation with a person who I won't reveal their identity, but a close person, a friend of mine, who spent 30 years in the beauty industry. And their job was essentially to regulate different beauty products and different household products. And what I learned from that conversation is that what I said earlier is there's not a lot of money in integrity, meaning this person would explain to me the processes by which various products were put on the market. So example, it'd be a new product for women, and the trials consisted of, we took 30 women for 3 months and none of them got a rash, and we put it on the shelves now, and 2 million people, 2 million women slathered on their largest organ every day. And we think there's these checks and balances in place, and there is to a degree in these bodies, but in later stages of capitalism, they get captured, right? You know, the idea of agency capture with the FDA and stuff like that. So I had conversations with him at length, like I'm talking like 30, 40 hours. That was like, it was like a horror show. Like he would tell me that, people are probably listening to this right now are like, huh? He would tell me this one product he worked on where it was women's makeup, and he and his team concluded that it would very likely cause lung cancer in women if they used it. It's sort of a spray. And the company, which is a very large company, came to him and said, thank you for your services, but you're no longer needed. And then he said about a year later, he saw it was one of the hottest products in Allure, or one of those beauty magazines for women.
Wow.
And yeah, and it goes back to this conversation about self-reliance, is that like, and this can be seen as depressing in some way or kind of empowering, in that like, I don't really believe as many people are looking out for me out there as people want to believe, you know, your politicians, but even like your corporations, your governing bodies, that I then said, well, screw this. I'm getting things out of my house that I've been using on my largest organ and disrupting my microbiome. Things as simple as my Tide clothing wash or my dishwasher or detergent, anything that I could have remnants on and then eat and put in my body and could start to disrupt my system. And when I took apart my bathroom, my kitchen, changed my laundry detergent, started cleaning my house with basically just a couple drops of organic soap, rubbing alcohol, a couple drops of a scent, all of a sudden the anxiety and depression that I also had, which I thought was just ingrained in my Irish genetics, was gone. And, you know, I've been on probably 4 or 5 SSRI medications over my lifetime. And I just sort of thought, seeing my dad and seeing my dad's family, I just thought that, well, this is just that the side of my genes that's, because I'm Irish and Italian, this is the Irish side, and we're just sort of depressed people. And that's just how it is. And then in the months after that, as I started doing that, I was in Costa Rica and Florida and kind of traveling. And I had a moment where I was like, oh, this is also what it's like to not have a mental illness. Like, I don't have a physical illness now, but I also don't have a mental illness. And I got to see what other people, you know, what it's like to just kind of get up out of bed in the morning, or not have to set an alarm clock, or not have to cut social situations short because your anxiety is, you know, overwhelming. And so the combination of those two things, and this is what I outlined in my book, because people were asking me, and it sounds complex, but it's really just going back to these blue zones in our primordial existence, is that like, get everything out of your life that isn't supposed to be there. Like, you don't need to have all these chemicals in your house, and there's actually great alternatives to those things, toothpaste, deodorant, stuff like that. And that was, to me, having these conversations with this guy, and then changing all this stuff in my house and watching my entire body change. Like, I'm talking like dark circles that were gone. My hair got thicker. The grays I had on the side of my head were less. I wasn't bloated. I was a better friend to people. I was a better brother. I was a better, all these different things. I was like just this like totally different person that I almost didn't recognize. And it all came from just living like our ancestors, essentially.
Yeah, it's incredible how much noise there is too. Like you mentioned, like realizing what it feels like to not live with those physical and mental chains almost. And it's almost like there's just so much noise in our systems that when you remove those things, you become way more aware of how you're feeling. We've sort of like numbed ourselves out, gotten out of touch with how we feel, how our guts working, all these things. And when you go back to basics and not only like an elimination diet, but like an elimination lifestyle, you can almost see how things affect you a lot more easily.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this, doing this podcast and talking to different people and interacting with certain people, do you feel like there's a percentage of people that lack sort of that HighTrade openness where if you were to have these conversations with them, they would treat you like you were a nut job? Because I find that when I try to tell people about this, my book, I mean, some people see the positive changes in me, but
Yeah.
there are people that like there's something in their head that when you try to tell them that they might be, they shouldn't, they should filter their tap water. There's
Yeah.
something in their constitution. I don't know if it's that their ego's under threat, but there's something where I find, and I would say probably 60 to 70% of people, they go, I don't want to hear it. Like, I don't want
Yeah.
to talk. I don't want to go there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I think I forget what podcast I was listening to, but they were talking about when someone is making a change, whether that's pursuing an entrepreneurial venture or changing their diet or something like that, they'll find that people around them are often trying to talk them out of it, or be disbelieving, or say it's nonsense, or be skeptical, or be negative. And a lot of times it's a cognitive dissonance because they want to be more fit or start their own business or get healthier. And there's two ways for, but they see the contrast between you, who's working towards that, and themselves. And so it creates a cognitive dissonance. So there's two ways that they can correct that and remove that cognitive dissonance. One is making a change themselves and actually working on their health, their diet, starting that business, whatever it is. The other is trying to bring you back to the state they're in. And so oftentimes it's easier for people to try to do that by naysaying you, by dismissing what you're doing, by trying to discredit it, by trying to call you wacky or crazy. And as long as that is easier for them than making an actual change themselves, they'll continue to do that.
Sure. Makes sense. It's also like I was kicked out of the ulcerative colitis subreddit. And I went on a whole rant on my podcast, which is called Unmentionable. I do it every Friday. And I went on this whole rant about, we talk so much about the media controlling information, and that's definitely true. But, there's also these really rigid ideological silos online that are controlled, and they don't realize how they're sort of like conduits for whatever neoliberal agenda is kind of rushing through. Meaning, like, one of the rules on the ulcerative colitis subreddit is you can't try to link the disease and diet. And if you do that, they're very angry with you because I think they see it as a personal attack on the people there. Meaning, when I've tried to kind of go on there, and I don't even need to at this point. Like, I have a lot of stuff going on, but I really am coming to a place of wanting to help people. People will bite my head off because I think they feel like I'm saying it's your fault to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's like the whole like healthy at every size and fit shaming. It's all the same flavor. It's funny you bring that up about neoliberalism. So I want to ask you, what is your opinion on like the shift that seems to have happened in the health community and society in general, from like liberals almost becoming more censoring and more conservative in a lot of ways, and like liberal media being like, you can't say this, you can't say that, like restricting freedom of speech and restricting, like, I'm not coming at this from any political affiliation myself. I'm kind of just a libertarian. I think everyone should do whatever they want. But it seems ironic that, in like university settings, I've heard this happens a lot. And you mentioned on the even the ulcerative colitis subreddit, like, you can't talk about certain things because they could be offensive to certain people's delicate sensibilities. How do you think about that?
Well, I fancy myself a little bit of a media critic because for about 12 years, I worked in various facets of the media. I was a producer, I was a reporter, I was a writer, I've been a publicist as well. And one of the things that I would say is more common among, I'm kind of like you. I don't really, I don't even vote because I just, that's its own conversation. But I wouldn't consider myself right wing or left wing. I just consider myself, I'm very heterodox, and anything against a power center is really what I'm into. So I'm kind of anti-war or anti-big pharma. But traditionally, when you look at, I guess, this kind of iteration of liberals, it's that, you know, there's kind of like, first of all, there's the limousine liberal, right? And it's the person that loves institutions, and they love those institutions because those institutions have largely benefited them. So, that's wealthy people. So they call them the limousine liberals, the West Coast liberals, the academia, stuff like that. They love those institutions and they don't want to question them, and they're so moored to them because, why would I question those? They've given me this great salary and this great life, and I can't even understand the struggles of working class people. But in the 90s, it's so funny how everything's kind of flipped, because in the 90s, the right wing was sort of the nut jobs with the Bush and Cheneys and the pro-war people, and the traditional liberal or leftist was anti-war, anti-CIA, anti-FBI, anti-power centers, let's say.
Yeah.
And that was, if you watch a great kind of way to look at it is if you watch Glenn Greenwald, who I'm a big fan of, that, as an independent journalist, everyone considers him, he's the right wing guy now when he was the left wing guy. And it's because the flip is that I think what happens is when people kind of feel like something's off in society, they try to look to institutions to save them when they really need to save themselves. And I think what happens is why liberals, they see something's wrong now, people on the left, like the kind of society is wrong, whether that's agency capture, media capture, capitalism, different things like that. They see something's wrong. And so they need to turn to someone to save them.
Mm-hmm.
And then you end up defending these systems that are oppressing you. And part of that is also because I don't know if that's a left or right thing, but a lot of people don't understand the systems that are oppressing them. So even I would say 90% of people don't really understand how the money system's fake, like different things like that. So you kind of just look for a boogeyman, right? You kind of look for like, well, is it this, is it that? And they trot out different things. It's white supremacy, it's racism, it's different things. You could point to that. But one of the things that's really funny, and this is a little off on a tangent here, but it's really important for people who know someone who's LGBT or the community. One of the more controversial things that I've said, because I used to host this podcast called Shame on You, and it was one of the biggest LGBT podcasts. And my friends are like, why don't you do more, advocacy work for like gay guys and stuff like that? And I said to someone the other day, I was like, the battles have kind of been won for the gay guys. Like, we can become the CEO of Apple. We can get married. What else do you want me to do? And what's behind a lot of this stuff is there are institutions, these LGBT NGOs that, 99% of their money now has to go towards something. So it's the faux outrage cycle. So there's a genocide of trans people. And then you look it up and it's like 30 trans people were murdered, and a lot of those were sex workers. And that's kind of commensurate with the amount of sex workers that get murdered. But a lot of people, they're busy and they don't have time. They're on TikTok and stuff like that. So you just have to kind of dangle things for them to get mad at.
Yeah.
And so that's really what I think this new stage of the left is that they're addicted to this outrage cycle, and these NGOs are kind of messing with them, and the corporations are messing with them, and the security state's messing with them. And they can't kind of figure it out. And so, well, what do they need to point to? Well, it's all conservatives or independents or libertarians at the same time. And I think that's largely what's behind a lot of it, even though that was kind of long-winded.
No, that's super interesting take. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to lose everyone now and say like the conservatives have just as many issues. You talk about like people needing to focus on themselves to fix their problems. And I think the conservatives have gone from like relying on systems like war, not war per se, but you talk about like big corporations and keeping tax rates down and all these things. Now they're anti-system, anti big government, anti all these things, and like basically saying it's the systems that are causing these problems. It's the systems that are at fault when again, like on an individual level, I also don't vote. On an individual level, like voting and trying to change government, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but your efforts are like so meaningless if you think about the 300 million people in the US at least. Like there's so much more you can do to help yourself and those around you locally.
It's like my therapist said, sorry to interrupt, my therapist always says this line to me. It's extremely basic, but I really tell people, I probably think it 3 to 4 times a day. I stop and think it, and it's just, what can you control? So in anything in life, speaking of my health, is that like why I fixed my mental health is because that's all I have is my mind. The world can be crazy around me, but I've got my mind. With my physical health, I've only got this body. I'm responsible for this body. So it's what I put in this body. And, it's very empowering when you say to people, your life is a series of thousands and thousands of decisions. You decide who you talk to, who you have sex with, who you date, what you put in your body, what media you consume. Every aspect of that is your responsibility. And I find that very empowering. But a lot of people who don't have a self-concept or directionless, they hear that and they have a meltdown. And it's because they need a savior. We're the tribe. We need the person that comes and saves us. And for them, that's AOC or Donald Trump or whatever it is. But I always say to people, no, you need to go and be your own hero with your health and stuff like that. Or, business wise, the way I live is largely kind of removed from the system. I'm an internet entrepreneur. I do marketing, but I do minimal interaction with clients because I only take on people that I personally enjoy because I want to see them succeed. But I kind of live outside the system. I don't really consume mainstream media. I do what I want all day. I don't really answer to a lot of people. So that's what I advocate for. But, most people want someone to take care of them. Most people don't really care that much about their rights. They just want someone to kind of get in there and take the reins of their life and push them in certain directions, or they want to blame their ex. But the reality is you stayed, you decided, you picked this person and you tolerated that behavior. And it really does come down to this awakening that I really push for a lot of people to go through it, is that like, you really need to take the reins on almost every aspect of your life. And I don't mean that you can't rely on people. I advocate for love and friendships. Those things are extremely important. But at the end of the day, like, you need to be responsible for every micro facet of your life. And I do believe that's too scary for a lot of people.
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. It's overwhelming for a lot of people. Jordan, can you talk about like in addition to diet and removing a lot of these things from your life, what are some other things that you found helpful mentally or physically, other parts of your daily routine or things you've done to upgrade your mindset, your business, that you found really helpful for you?
On the diet side, I think the biggest culprit is seed oils. I think if you can listen, 99% of restaurants use seed oils, so you're in trouble there if you eat a lot. But getting seed oils out of your life, just getting seed oils out of your life and filtering your shower water and your tap water can dramatically improve your life. I have told people, they say, where do I start? I've got this autoimmune disease. And I say, just start with those 3. I don't want to overwhelm you. And then I would say for them to start with a very basic diet and sort of add things in and see how their body responds and be very honest with themselves. And then the secondary aspect, I would say, is to try to find an alternative for almost every product in your house that you use that's good. I have a bunch of them in my book, but I use Nellie's laundry detergent. It's just as good as Tide, and it's scentless. You're not getting any of the fragrance issues, and it's not going to mess up your hormones like different products do. So I would go through and kind of do that. The other thing is, this is a very small one, but it has changed my life a great deal. I'm half Irish, half Italian. I can tan, but not well. And so I take this supplement called astaxanthin, which is, the spelling's all over the place, but I take this supplement. It's in, you're nodding, so but it's like in flamingos and crabs, and it's like an internal sunscreen. So I went to the Caribbean, and I'm not a huge fan of traditional sunscreen because of my conversations with this person. So I have an organic sunscreen, just zinc oxide, basically, I put on my face. And then I take the astaxanthin, and I have gone out in the sun in Anguilla for hours and not burned, which I think is also tied to the oxidizing with the seed oils and stuff like that. So those are the things I start with. I also do little things. I've got a red light therapy machine in my house, which is just kind of a splurge that I did. It's about 6 feet tall. I do that. I do end of my showers. I do to get the shock proteins going. I do the last 30 seconds cold every day, which is also really great for your hair. So these are all different things I go through. And then the new thing I've been doing that's really great is I've been reading a lot about blue light and its effects on your health. You shouldn't be staring at your screen at night anyways, because you want to be able to sleep well. But I've been wearing blue light blocking glasses at night. So after 8 p.m., I kind of block that light out. I kind of get my house in a way that it's candle lit. So it also helps me kind of wind down. You could throw in some magnesium, L-theanine. I like GABA as well to kind of get yourself off to sleep. And there's different things in my book I talk about, like sleep-wise. Mentally, I think mentally, like this stuff's all kind of just, Amazon and altering things in your life and your grocery order, which, for a lot of people, it's like, that's the easy part.
Yeah.
Mentally, I think mentally and career-wise, I say to people, in the times we're in, you want as much autonomy over your life as possible, whether that's, trying to get out of the traditional money system and stuff like that. But I think largely, if you are someone who thinks that you could run a business, the way to approach that is to find the thing that you want to still do at 3 a.m. and you want to do alone at 3 a.m. If you don't have any love for the thing that you are doing, it's going to be a nightmare. So I think sit with yourself for 30 days and say, what is the thing that I wanted when I was a kid before the world took over and kind of figured out. And for me, I've always been interested in people. So that's why I went into marketing and writing, because I just love social psychology and stuff like that. And then mentally, this one's, I would say, is a little more fringe, but I'm a big advocate for having a small social circle. I think when you divide your time between a lot of people, you start to give them aspects of yourself that you feel drained. And beyond your immediate family, I keep a friendship circle of about 4 or 5 people that I'm really close with and I've been friends with forever. People that enrich my life and make me want to be a better person. That saying, you're the average of the 5 people in your life. But I think the final aspect of all this and why I was able to tackle these things in life is that, like, you need to have a really intense exploration of why you are the way you are, meaning you think your personality is something that's interwoven in your DNA, but the personality that you have is really how you survived growing up. So you are, me, I take over a room, I'm extroverted, which probably comes from an insecurity level, but largely because that's how I got noticed when I was growing up. And until you have to go on that journey to really understand yourself. If people say to me, how can you go to Thailand 5 weeks alone and not be lonely? And it's like, because I like myself. I like being with myself. I don't spend years alone. I don't spend 6 months alone, but I like being with myself. And that's because I actually went on the journey to understand who the hell I am and to be able to look at myself in the mirror and the choices that I've made and say, like, I like this person and I can rely on this person. But that is the hardest part of this whole thing, is really, who are you and what makes you tick? And the biggest thing that I've learned is that confidence is quiet. And you think when you're younger, you're 25, you're like, oh, that guy's got so much confidence. And it's so funny to me because I realize the most confident people I know are quiet and they don't have social media. It's because they're working, they're putting in the hours, and they're trying to figure out who they are. And they're not, you also will notice they're calm. They don't get triggered. So they're able to kind of distance themselves from, if someone's projecting onto them, like you said earlier, people project onto you what they need you to be. they're able to have this self-concept where they don't even get flustered because they go, oh, that's you. That's your childhood. That's your insecurities. That's what you need me to be for you to be okay. And I've studied these people. I've studied really hyper successful people. I've been around them. And one of the things I notice is they're very even keel in that they don't get flustered when something comes up in their life. And learning why you get triggered and why someone bothers you, and that whole unraveling is, a really long conversation, but it's something that I really tell people, like, if you can study yourself on a daily basis, which sounds like intense narcissism, but if you can unravel yourself, one of the things you will learn, like, this is why I'm pursuing music now, is because, I did comedy for so long because I was a broken person with a lot of trauma that needed to survive. And I got really good at the skill of putting up a barrier and making jokes to just make sense of all my trauma. And now that I'm in this really good place, I'm pursuing music because it allows me to actually display the person that I am, which is actually a more emotional person who is sensitive in a lot of ways and has a lot of pain that I want to express in a different way. And it's why I find myself pulling away from comedy more, because I don't need that thing as much. Because people like Teal Swan made me realize that, like, there's two people inside me. There's the, like, clown, but there's also that person that really is trying to connect with people. And I don't love this person as much anymore because I did the work. And so I'm trying to be this person, and this person feels better right now for me, in a sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think that work is really hard to do, and it can take a long time, and you have to keep doing it is the tricky part. Yeah, it's funny you talk about the loudest person and, like, quiet confidence. I I so much resonate with that. It applies to so many aspects of life too, so many areas. Like, I still work in a corporate job, and it's so funny. You can tell the people who are the least confident, because in a meeting they'll be speaking fast and really raising their voice to be heard, and you can tell that person is just not confident in themselves or their opinions. And the people with the most gravitas, the people who are most secure, they'll kind of wait, talk slowly, make a few small comments, and usually everyone listens. And so, I think a lot of young people, especially starting out in careers or entrepreneurship, they think they need to talk really loud and they need to talk really fast because they're nervous that they'll lose people if they don't. But yeah, I absolutely resonate with what you're saying about quiet confidence. It's really
Yeah, well,
interesting.
I said I would never date someone who posts more than 3 Instagram stories a day. My friend was like, why? And I'm like, because think about what that is. That's like, look at me, look at my lunch, look how good I look.
That's
That's
good life
that. Like,
advice.
I haven't been on Instagram posting stories for months because
Yeah.
uh, I feel okay. I don't need to show everyone, I'm working on music and I'll post it on there to get people listening. But I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't, especially, when you're like 38 and you're like posting 12 Instagram stories a day of all the minutia in your life. Like it just kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know. Just, it is, I think people don't realize it is what it is. Like they don't
Yeah.
realize what they're kind of projecting out to everyone. And I
Yeah.
feel really bad for this younger generation because it's like, you can easily knock them off just by they don't get a minimum amount of likes on something and they're like ruined. And
Yeah.
we had, I don't know how old you are, but like how old are
I'm
you?
31.
Okay, so like I'm 36 and like I didn't have a cell phone until I was 20 and I didn't have social media till I was 19 or so. So I grew up in a different time where we weren't so moored to what other people thought of us so intensely. And I really do feel bad for these younger people. Like I've tried to hire them because like they're like aliens to me. Like I don't
Yeah.
they are they really think you're I think it's because of social media. They think you're participating in the movie about their life a lot
Yep.
of the
Yep.
It's sick.
Yeah, I didn't have social media until I was basically out of college. So similar, grew up in the time of the flip phone. And yeah, I remember those days fondly. It's changed a lot.
What do you work in? You said you worked in corporation. Do you write
Yeah.
on?
So I've worked in mergers and acquisitions for a variety of growth stage tech companies. Right now, the company I'm at helps fight credit card fraud. So yeah. So I look for other technology companies for them to buy.
What drew you to doing this podcast in sort of the alternative health realm?
So I found the carnivore diet back in 2016. You mentioned Paul Saladino. I've had him on like 4 times. But yeah, I basically, coming out of college, I was a competitive lightweight rower. And I had a lot of health issues from that. I also worked, in very stressful 90-hour work week, corporate environments, management consulting, investing. And that took a toll on me. And so I was looking for something. I basically went through my own health journey around that. And then I listened to a bunch of podcasts. So I started the show back in 2018. And I've just put out an episode every week since, and it's been a blast just talking to people.
Yeah, good for you, man. You know what? I a lot of doctors, I call them pompous, which I kind of can because coming, yeah, I think I feel like people like you contribute just as much as a traditional brain surgeon or a doctor like that because I think these two things can really work in harmony, the traditional medical system and more holistic alternative health. A lot of doctors, they go, I got a degree from Harvard. Like, how dare you kind of say these things to me? And it's like, no, we need to unify a lot of people right now. And it's like, if what you put out or what I put out or what Paul Saladino puts out keeps one more person out of the ER or, getting a colonoscopy, then we can actually allow that system to serve the people that are really sick, that have cancer, that have, are 75 years old, or some sort of calamity in their life, like a car accident. That's what that system's meant for. And those two things really can work in harmony. But I will tell you that, like, doing this, I have gotten really, and I'm not trying to be a health influencer. I'm really just like a internet entrepreneur who does pot. But it was just so many people were asking me for things. So I just wrote this book. And it's like, so many people in the traditional system think that I'm doing this as an attack on them.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm trying to make your day less packed with patients. I'm trying to keep the system open for people.
Yeah.
And it really is, people's egos are so intense, particularly in that profession, that I can't believe that me telling people to have bone broth every day, I cannot believe the reaction that it's elicited from medical. You think bone broth's gonna cure this? And I'm like, I'm standing right here. I had anxiety, depression. I had chronic disease. My stepdad had heart issues. I know 2 people with ulcerative colitis that I've helped kind of just get rid of it. And it's like, we're right here. We're Kenny Honest on YouTube. We're the holistic Nick on Twitter. It's the same situation as me. I had him on my podcast. It's like, we're standing right here. We're not like holograms.
Yeah.
This is real. And there are small changes you can even make in your life but I don't know if it's just like a kind of evolution that certain people are just wired to be rule followers. And it's sort of just their path in life, is that they're destined to not question the systems, and they're destined to be led into different ways. And I don't know how much I should interfere with that in a way.
Yeah. I mean, the anecdotes are extremely powerful, and I agree. I think the two systems can definitely work in harmony for sure. Or the lack of system in the system. But yeah, I think a lot of it is also like our parents' generation very much was like, look to authority, trust your doctor, trust authority. And so I think some of that is changing. It still exists in people our age and younger people, but I think in general, people are becoming more open-minded. But there's a lot of BS out there too.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem, is you can never figure out you start getting alternative and heterodox, some people don't know when to pump the brakes.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, shove a crystal up your rectum or whatever nonsense people are feeding you. And then they go, it's like when someone's a conspiracy theorist, it's like, oh, they think that you've gone QAnon, but really their definition of conspiracy theory is just questioning the motives of big pharma, which are corporations that pay billions in fines for committing fraud. That's also, but they kind of put it all in there. So that's another thing. You just have to kind of really have long conversations and explore nuance with people, because that's where almost everything lives, is in that shades of gray nuance. But now we live in this clickbait time where it's like, psycho Christian theocracy, gays need to burn, and then like wacky rainbow hair Portland person, communist. And that's kind of all we're fed, forgetting that most people live in that 90% middle.
It doesn't help that all the algorithms draw us to one side or another too. Cool. Well, thank you so much for coming on today, Jordan. This has been a pleasure. I feel like I could talk to you for hours, but where can people find the book? And I'll of course have links to everything about you in the show notes as well, if you want to plug anything.
Sure. So my marketing firm is Gray Smoke Media. We do very elite marketing. Our minimum's 10 grand a month. So if that's not in your budget, don't contact us. But that's what I do kind of on a regular basis. And then I host a podcast called Unmentionable every Friday. And then this book's called The Freedom Blueprint. You can put it in the show notes or the YouTube or whatever. And then I'm deleting my Twitter because I've had enough. So I'm probably going to have a burner account just to look at alternative news, but I'm really going all in on music for the next 6 to 8 months. And so I just don't want to be distracted. So don't follow me on Twitter. I'm about to delete it, but I do have an Instagram. It's at JPowerComedy. And you can just DM me there, and I kind of post things there. I don't post a lot, but I'll post the link to this book in my bio if you want to check it out. And it's just on Gumroad. I just did it very alternative, and it's only $25. I just put it pretty low for people just so they can go into it. But really, really, like, some of it you might be reading and going like, this is a little wacky, but like things like I do niacin flushes. I don't know if you've done those, Scott.
Yeah.
So
you like go in the sauna with it too?
Yeah, I've done that. I've done that with the red light machine and stuff like that. I do kind of a little wacky stuff, but I will tell you, that every time I try something new that was supposed to be wacky, it's not that wacky.
Yeah.
So I feel great. So it's like I put that all in there. So if you guys want to check it out, and then I'm also going to write one called How Not to Go Bald. And because I'm realizing from this book is that a lot more of the stuff, I think certain people are just meant to go bald because they have bad genetics, but I also think, like, if you look at how young people are going bald, like so much younger, they're starting to lose their hair at like 21 now. I wanted to kind of examine that and the hormone aspect to that. And one of the things I do use is like a shampoo bar. Is one of the things it's just like a very basic shampoo bar, because the sulfates in the shampoo and other chemicals are linked to hair loss. There's a bunch of class action lawsuits in the US against shampoo companies. So I'm going to do that. And so I'll post that on my Instagram as well. And cool. People want to read that as well.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Sounds cool. Great. Well, thanks again, Jordan. I'll have links to all of that, and folks should definitely check out the book. And thank you so much for coming on today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the show. You can find The Scott Mize Show on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Please leave a comment, like, review, or share the podcast with your friends or followers. It helps more people find the show.